A movie was released in 1999. You've probably seen it. You probably thought it was fiction. It wasn't. The central prop of the film, an ancient book supposedly co-authored by darkness itself, was not a prop. It was real. Delivered to the set by private courier. Source: unknown. Purpose: classified under a shell corporation that no longer exists. The actor who handled it for months started speaking in languages he didn't know. The crew stopped sleeping. And on the night they filmed the final scene, every light on set died simultaneously. Except one. The doorway stayed lit, cold, iridescent, casting no shadows. 4 crew members collapsed at the same moment. The camera operator looked through his lens and saw something that put him in a psychiatric facility for 2 years. What he saw through that lens has never been made public. Until now. There were 3 books delivered to that production. One destroyed itself that night. The other 2 are still out there. And one of them, I know exactly where it is. This is not a theory. This is what actually happened on the set of The Ninth Gate. And by the end of this video, you'll never watch that film the same way again. In 1999, a movie was released. Critics reviewed it. Audiences watched it. The studio made money. And somewhere in a castle in the south of France, something opened a door. What came through has never left. I've spent 30 years acquiring things that don't officially exist. Manuscripts the Vatican declared destroyed in the 16th century. Texts that were burned publicly, while the real copies were smuggled out through the back of the courthouse. Objects that serious institutions won't acknowledge, but will spend enormous resources trying to locate. I know this world. I know its buyers. I know its sellers. And I know when something goes wrong inside it. In the spring of 1997, something went very wrong. There is a tier of wealth that operates entirely outside public awareness. These are not people who collect paintings. Paintings are trophies. Paintings are announcements. Look what I can afford. The collectors I'm describing don't want to be seen. They want knowledge that was suppressed, knowledge that was hunted, knowledge that cost other people their lives to protect. They acquire grimoires, ancient books of ritual, summoning, and what certain scholars carefully describe as dimensional manipulation. They acquire them because these texts are not metaphors. They are instructions, and the most dangerous instructions ever committed to paper were written by a Venetian printer in the 1660s, who found something he was never supposed to find. His name was Aristide Torchia. The public record says he's a fictional character, an invention of the Spanish novelist whose book Polanski adapted. The public record is wrong. Deep within the restricted archive of the Ambrosian Library in Milan, a section that requires Vatican clearance to access, there are records of a Venetian printer operating in the 1660s. He acquired a fragmented manuscript from a Middle Eastern source, a text older than the Abrahamic religions. Known in certain occult circles as the Dele Melanicon, loosely translated, the Black Threshold. He didn't just translate it, he bound it. And the binding process was not ordinary. The ink was iron gall, crushed obsidian, and in verified historical cases, the blood of the author himself. The paper was not wood pulp, it was vellum, treated calf skin, processed with alchemical compounds that reacted to human body heat, to the oils of human skin. When a person handled one of these books, the book handled them back. It established a resonance with the reader, a connection that didn't end when you put the book down. Torchia was arrested in 1666. He was burned at the stake, but not before 3 copies of his work disappeared from the record entirely. 3 copies. That number will matter. Remember it. When Roman Polanski decided to make The Ninth Gate, the script required a central prop, a 17th century grimoire called The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows. Standard procedure. The art department builds a convincing fake. Age the paper with tea. Bind it in distressed leather. Print the woodcut engravings on modern machines. The prop masters worked for weeks. Every version was rejected. Not by the studio, by the director. He said they looked artificial. He demanded weight. He demanded texture. He demanded a presence that couldn't be faked. The production schedule collapsed. The studio was losing millions per week. And then, without explanation, the problem solved itself. At the time, the crew assumed it was simply a production decision. A last-minute hire, a master craftsman from Prague. Later, much later, several of them would understand exactly what had been delivered to that set, and why none of them were ever the same afterward. 3 books appeared on set one morning. They were not made by the prop department. They arrived by private courier. The production budget listed the source as a shell corporation registered in Luxembourg. The entry was a single line. Archival material, consulting fee. No name, no address, no inventory description. The crew noticed immediately that these books were different. They smelled of ozone, damp earth, old copper. The leather bindings were cold to the touch, regardless of the temperature in the studio. Cold in a way that felt less like an absence of heat and more like the presence of something else entirely. And at night, when the stage lights were cut, the dark ink of the woodcut engravings held a faint, sickly luminescence. Not reflected light, not a trick of the eye. Something underneath the surface of the page. Breathing. The prop master on the production, a 20-year industry veteran, quietly submitted his resignation 3 days after the books arrived. He told no one why. In a private letter recovered years later by a journalist investigating the production, he wrote one sentence about what he had seen when he opened one of the books alone in the prop room. He wrote, "It was already open to the right page." He had never touched it before. No one had. Filming began the following Monday. Johnny Depp, cast as the cynical book dealer Dean Corso, was handed all 3 volumes. His character was a skeptic, a man who didn't believe in any of it. On the first day of handling the books, Depp complained of a migraine so severe he could barely read his lines. The medical team on set attributed it to stress. They were wrong. What was already beginning, the slow, systematic dissolution of the boundary between the actor and the artifact, would take months to fully reveal itself. And by the time anyone understood what was happening to him, it would be far too late to simply put the book down. There is a specific kind of deterioration that doesn't look like illness. It looks like dedication. It looks like a man disappearing into his role. What happened to Johnny Depp during the filming of The Ninth Gate looked exactly like that. It wasn't. Week 1, migraines so severe he could barely read his lines. The medic wrote stress in the report and moved on. Week 2, a metallic taste in his mouth that never left. Constant, pervasive, like old blood on the tongue. Week 3, something no one knew how to file. Between takes, crew members found him sitting alone. One of the books open in his lap, not reading, tracing. His fingertip moving slowly along the grooves of the woodcut engravings. The same lines, over and over. Eyes unfocused, lips moving quietly. They assumed he was running lines. He wasn't speaking English. No one on set recognized the language. No one asked him about it. That was the first mistake. To understand what was being done to Depp, you need to understand what a film set actually is. Ancient ritual required focused intention, controlled light, sacred geometry. A group of people directing their 60, sometimes 100 people, pour everything they have into a single scene. Repeated, refined, take after take after take. The anonymous collector who sent those books understood this. He didn't lend them to make the movie better. He used the production as a charging battery. Every take was a pulse of energy. Every repeated handling of the artifact built momentum toward something that had been planned long before cameras rolled. The movie was never the point. The movie was the mechanism. The audience thought they were watching a thriller. They were the fuel. By week 6, the reports became impossible to dismiss. Depp stopped eating with the crew, stopped acknowledging people between scenes. His attention had shifted in a way that multiple witnesses described independently. He looked through people, as if watching something that existed just behind the visible world. He told the production assistant his dressing room was wrong. Not that something was in it, that the room itself was wrong. The shadows in the corners didn't move correctly when the light source changed. The studio quietly brought in a psychologist. She recommended rest. Depp said the book needed to be finished. Then he corrected himself. He said he needed to
Tell me
finish
what
it,
you're seeing.
and paused, as if he was no longer certain there was a difference. That moment of hesitation,
The text
that barely
reveals a
perceptible pause
path,
between the
but
book
the
and I,
intent
would later be
behind
the
it
detail investigators
shifts.
returned to again
Or
and
is
again,
it my own?
because it meant the boundary had already dissolved. Not gradually, not in stages, all at once, quietly, while everyone watched. One incident was never made public. During a routine scene, Depp was examining an open engraving. The director called cut. Depp didn't move for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The entire crew stood frozen around him. No one approached. When he finally looked up, he asked one question. Calm, conversational, as if the answer were obvious. Which one of you moved the 9th engraving?
I see
The 9th
what
engraving was still
cannot
sealed
be
in its protective
seen.
sleeve, locked in the prop case across the room. Depp had never been shown it. No one responded. No one knew what to say. 3 days later, production moved south, to a chateau in the Aude region of France, the location of the film's climax, the final summoning, the last gate. What the crew didn't know, what none of them were told, was that the chateau wasn't chosen for its architecture. It was chosen because something was already there, inside the walls, beneath the stone, and it had been waiting for exactly this moment. There are places where something went wrong a long time ago, where silence has a texture, where the air sits differently against your skin. The chateau in the Aude region of France was one of those places. The crew arrived on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, 3 people had asked to be reassigned. None of them could explain why. The first sign was the animals. The surrounding farmland was ordinary countryside. Birds, foxes, the constant background noise of a living landscape. By the second day of shooting, that noise was gone. Complete silence. Unnatural silence. Every creature within half a mile had simply left. The local farmers noticed. They didn't come closer to investigate. The second sign was in the footage. When the first week of dailies came back from the lab, the editor found something in the background of several frames. Shadows that didn't match the lighting rig. Not misplaced shadows. Additional ones, tall, thin, standing in the corners of rooms, present in the developed film, absent during the actual shoot. No one reported it officially. The editor flagged it once, internally, and was told to move on. He left the production 2 days later. The climax required one setup. Depp walking through an illuminated archway, holding the open book. The prop department rigged massive halogens inside the tower, blinding white light flooding the doorway. The director called action. Depp stepped onto his mark, opened the book, and every light died simultaneously. No flicker, no warning. Total darkness,
Action.
except for the doorway, which remained lit. The light coming from the archway was cold, iridescent, a quality no halogen bulb produces. It cast no shadows. One camera operator described it afterward as the moment he understood that everything, the failed generators, the empty crew quarters at night, the additional shadows in the footage, had been building toward this single point. Not for the movie, for something the movie was covering. The air pressure dropped so rapidly that 4 crew members suffered burst eardrums at the same moment. A sound came from inside the archway, below the threshold of hearing, felt in the sternum, in the joints, in the back of the eyes. It made standing upright physically impossible. The focus puller looked through his camera lens. The doorway was no longer a doorway. It was a tier, a 3-dimensional rupture in the fabric of the space. Through the lens, he didn't see the interior of a French castle. He saw impossible geometries, a sky the color of bruised meat, architecture the human mind refused to process. He spent the following 2 years in a psychiatric facility in Switzerland. He gave one interview, never published. The camera saw more than we did. I should never have looked through the lens. Depp had frozen on his mark, staring into the tier. Book open, completely still. The camera operator tackled him to the ground, breaking his line of sight. At that exact moment, the book caught fire. Not a slow burn. A single flash of blue flame that consumed every page in under 3 seconds. No ash, no residue. The object simply ceased to exist. The tear collapsed inward, violently, like a wound forced shut, and the courtyard went dark. The studio issued a statement within 48 hours. Electrical equipment malfunction. NDAs were signed. Money changed hands. The event was buried. But 3 books had been delivered to that production. One lost in transit were never recovered. They weren't lost. Whoever took them got exactly what they came for. And what they came for was only the beginning. The gate was opened once. One night, one courtyard, one castle in the south of France. But the people who orchestrated it weren't satisfied with one gate in a remote location. They wanted a gate in every room, every screen, every mind that ever watched the film. And they built exactly that. Most people who watch The Ninth Gate remember the music. Haunting, repetitive, impossible to shake. What they don't know is that the composer received strict mathematical instructions before writing a single note. Not mood references, not creative direction. Ratios, precise geometric ratios extracted from the cipher grids hidden inside the genuine woodcut engravings. When translated into sound, those ratios produce binaural dissonance, a frequency conflict between audio channels that bypasses conscious processing and works directly on the subconscious mind. The music doesn't accompany the film. It holds something open. Acoustic analysts who isolated the vocal tracks found something that stopped them completely. The choral chanting beneath the main theme sounds ceremonial, ancient, Latin adjacent. It isn't Latin. The phonetics don't match any known human language. The singers were instructed to contort their palates to produce specific unnatural overtones. Overtones that, through standard stereo speakers, generate a carrying frequency, a signal. Every time the soundtrack plays, it reinforces the connection between the listener's mind and whatever came through that courtyard in France. The music is not atmosphere, it is infrastructure. The images are the second layer, the hanged man, the hermit, the labyrinth, the figure riding the beast. Not illustrations, not atmosphere, cognitive architecture. Shapes engineered to bypass analytical processing and embed directly into the subconscious. When you stare at them, your brain is forced to process geometries that correspond to the physics of the other side of that tier. You are not looking at a picture, you are being looked at. And every time someone pauses on a woodcut frame, rewinds a scene, analyzes the engravings, a microcharge moves back through the tether. The audience is not watching the film. The film is watching the audience. The physical book destroyed itself in France, but the two remaining copies function as servers, physical anchors for what the film now distributes digitally. In the years after production, certain figures in the entertainment industry experienced a rise that defied explanation. Immune to failure, untouched by scandal, surviving everything that should have ended them. The correlation with the disappearance of those two books is not subtle. They had secured a direct connection to whatever crossed through that courtyard, kept in climate-controlled vaults, not as art, as collateral. You cannot burn a digital file. You cannot lock a streaming platform in a vault. The book was destroyed in France, but its architecture was transferred, first onto celluloid, then onto every digital server that hosts the film today. The 9 gates have been decentralized. Every viewing is a renewal of the signal. Almost no one has noticed the most precise detail hidden in the final scene. As Depp's character walks toward the light, the 9th engraving appears on screen. For exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds is the minimum threshold for subconscious image retention. Below, conscious awareness. Above the threshold of permanent installation. The image doesn't fade the way memories fade. It stays, active, patient, waiting. The 9th engraving was never meant to be seen. It was meant to be installed. The film is streaming right now, on multiple platforms, in dozens of countries. Every view is a pulse. Every pause on a woodcut frame is a charge. Every person who watches that ending and feels the inexplicable unease that follows, that isn't atmosphere. That is the signal confirming reception. The gate in France was the origin. The screen in front of you is the delivery mechanism. And there is one final thing. One detail I have never told anyone about the 2 missing books, and where one of them is right now, that changes everything you think you understand about how this ends. Everything I've told you can be verified. The production records, the insurance claim, the psychiatric facility in Switzerland, the permanently closed tower. What I'm about to tell you now, I can only say once. I know where one of the remaining books is. I've known for 3 years. I haven't spoken about it, not because I couldn't, because the last person who tried to expose its location didn't disappear dramatically. They simply became unreachable, quietly, completely. The way a signal drops when you move too far from its source. The book is in Western Europe, private collection, owned by someone whose name appears regularly in the kind of press that makes them seem completely ordinary. That's all I can say. The entities that crossed through the tear don't operate the way you'd expect. They don't appear. They don't announce themselves. They influence. They attach to positions of power the way rust attaches to metal. Slowly, invisibly, until the structure underneath is no longer what it was. Look at the world since 1999. Not at individual events. At the pattern. The acceleration of division. The erosion of empathy. Institutions that existed for centuries hollowing out from the inside. That is not history unfolding. That is a feeding pattern. Before we go further, I need you to do something right now. Go back to the final scene of the ninth gate. The moment Depp steps toward the light. Watch it again. But this time, don't watch him. Watch the door frame. Lower left corner. Less than 2 seconds. A shape, partially obscured by the light bloom. The post-production team either missed it or chose to leave it in. I've shown this frame to 7 people. Every single one described it differently. Not because they saw different things, because what appears in that frame seems to show each person something specific to them. Pause on it right now. Then come back and tell me in the comments. What does your first instinct say it is? A figure? A symbol? Something familiar you can't quite place? Don't analyze it. First instinct only. That instinct is the part of you that already knows. Dean Corso was not a hero. He was a warning. A man who believed his skepticism protected him, who walked toward the light convinced he was the one doing the choosing. He wasn't. He had been an instrument from the very first page. His journey is not fiction. It is a map. And if you've watched this far, you are somewhere on that map. The people who built this operation understood one thing better than anyone else. The most effective prison is one the prisoner helps construct. They didn't force anyone to watch the film. They made it compelling. They made it the kind of thing people recommend to each other. And every recommendation was another thread in the tether. Every view, every conversation, every comment analyzing the engravings. All of it, feeding back. The book was opened in a 17th century manuscript. The gate was torn open in a castle in France. The signal was embedded in a film that has been watched by tens of millions of people across 25 years. You just watched this video, which means something that operates on the principle of invitation now knows that you're aware of it. The question was never whether the gate is open. The question, the only question that has ever mattered, is what you do now that you're standing directly in front of it. The gate was opened in a castle in France, but it leads directly to the back of your mind.